So thank you for joining us, Rashmi. I wondered if you could give us a little introduction to yourself and your background before we start with the Q&A.
Sure. So I'm Rashmi Becker, and I'm the founder of Step Change Studios, which I set up to support disabled people of all ages and abilities to be active through dance.
Great. How long have you been delivering sessions for participants with complex disabilities?
So we started in 2017, so that's been about 7 years now.
And what was your starting point or your catalyst to offer the sessions? So how did you first get involved with working with a complex disabilities audience?
There are a couple of things. Firstly, I have an older brother who has complex needs. He has severe autism. He has some sight loss. He has some mobility challenges and other health conditions as well. And I became his guardian about 12 years ago now. And I started seeing the positive impact of physical activity on his health and well-being. It really helped him in terms of reducing his challenging behavior, improving his mood, improving his sort of communication and just his sort of social skills. And I was also working in social care and was seeing the same thing, particularly with people with complex needs, that the power of music, movement was having a really positive impact. And I had also sort of trained in dance, had a background in dance, and was finding there wasn't really any opportunities for people with complex needs to be active, especially with dance. And so I set up Step Change Studios, expecting it would be a sort of part-time weekend thing, but fast forward 7 years and it's become full-time, and we have a team of teachers and we work in all sorts of settings with all sorts of ages.
Looking back to your kind of first sessions, or your first session that you ever delivered, how did that go? Were there any challenges or things you maybe didn't realise or hadn't considered at the time?
Definitely. The first session, it was in a residential care setting. And it's interesting because in one sense, it was just such a lovely session because it was people with really severe disabilities, physical disabilities, learning disabilities. They were adults, and it was the first time they'd really had any such session, and so they really loved the experience. They were joining in. It was very gentle sort of interactions to music, but I involved them in sort of making choices and picking music and so on, and it was really positive in that sense. But at the same time, it really struck me because I arrived and everyone was sort of dispersed in different spaces and different workrooms. They weren't really ready for the session. I don't think anyone really knew I was coming. There were no staff present. As soon as I arrived, the staff sort of thought it was an opportunity for them to all have a break. So sort of on my own with a very large group of people, people coming in and out of the room. There was a lot going on. There's a lot of noise. So it was very difficult to create a sort of calm, comfortable space. The music wasn't working properly, so there were lots of things going wrong as a first session. So while people had a lovely time, and there were just some really, the fact it was 7 years ago, I can still see the face of one particular lady who only had movement in her head. So she could only move her head. She couldn't move any other parts of her body. And just, she had wanted Whitney Houston. I remember how much she loved it and was really happy. But I also clearly remember all the bits of, oh, okay, I need to do this differently next time, because there are about 10 different things that didn't go to plan or that I hadn't anticipated.
You touched on there on kind of the challenges of staffing, so staff kind of, or support staff or care workers, maybe being less involved, and how that's challenging. And you also touched on the fact that no one seemed prepared for you coming along, and that made things a little bit disjointed and a little bit more tricky. What are your tips for overcoming that challenge of making sure staff and participants are prepared and engaged and ready to take part?
It's become so important now from that experience, and as you said, continues to be. The planning of a session is so important. And so I sort of have a template that before any new session with new people, very simple table where I want to know who the people are, so in terms of their names, their ages, so that we can make things age appropriate, what their needs are, whether they have any particular things that they like, so whether that's about music or, you know, some types of props, how they communicate, looking at the understanding the space that an activity will happen in. So, you know, are there mirrors? What's the floor like? You know, is it in a carpeted room? Is there furniture? Just so getting a sense of the actual space where we'll be delivering, and understanding who will be supporting the session, and how many people as well. So, you know, getting a sense of, do people have challenging behavior? If they do, do they have one-to-one support, or what support will be available? And so really getting a proper sense of the group that you'll be teaching, the support you'll have, but also the aims, because people want to learn for different, you know, want to dance for different reasons. So it may just be for fun, a social activity. It may be to help them with things like challenging behavior or improving communication and concentration, or it might be to help them get active and fit, and improve their balance or flexibility or strength, for example. So getting a better understanding of that, so I can tailor the session better. And then having a conversation. So where possible, I try to speak to the key person to make sure there's an understanding of staff's role and, you know, how critical that will be in supporting the session, especially with complex needs, because having engaged staff makes such a big difference to how the session can go. If staff are engaged, you can have a really positive session, and the staff themselves can get a lot out of it in their interactions with people they support. Whereas if staff are just disengaged or really busy or have other things that they need to do, that can really affect the success of a session. So that's really important.
There's quite a lot of things that you might want to gather and discuss with the people that are taking part and the staff. How do you make sure that that's not overwhelming? Because we want to collect information, and we need to know about individuals and their preferences, their aims, etc., in order to tailor a session appropriately for them. But if you're working with a group of people, that could be quite overwhelming as an instructor or a coach. So how do you balance that between getting enough information but not letting it overwhelm?
For me, I'd rather almost have too much information than not enough, because then I can distill that and work out, okay, what are the key things I need to know? So, for example, if someone has challenging behavior and you know, loud music upsets them, that's really, really critical. And so that's really important to know. So, you know, that will help me make sure I think about, you know, volume, for example. Whereas, you know, if the more general preferences about specific songs, etc., that's something you can be a bit flexible with, because sometimes, you know, once you understand the client group, people might have particular things that they might be obsessive about or like, but introducing new things can be healthy, and trying to sort of be a bit more creative and sort of encouraging people to sort of challenge themselves a little more and step outside certain comfort zones and routines and structures can be productive. A lot of that also develops over time. So often with my sessions and with my teachers for initial sessions, we'll take it really easy in terms of, let's just get to know people. Let's start with something simple, and then, you know, we might then develop that. But it's about, we're conscious we're going to a space where people don't know us, you know, we don't know them. So let's just ease in, let's involve them, let's get a sense of their capabilities, because also with people with complex needs, sometimes you're reliant on someone else, such as support staff, to give you that assessment. But the number of times we've been into places or run activities where staff have then said, oh, I had no idea that they could dance, or I had no idea, we've never seen them, you know, get up and move. So you also need to take it on board, but not treat it as the absolute law. And, you know, again, because people, even in our sessions, we've had teachers go into one session where, you know, people love them and they think they're the best teacher in the world. Then with another group, they feel differently, because that's about, you know, sometimes it's about that chemistry and the way people relate to each other. So getting all of that right, I think, for initial sessions is really important. But having that background information to fall back on, like, you know, I know Sense has pen
participant profiles. Yeah,
that's
exactly.
right.
Yeah.
That can be helpful, that if you've had a session and something's not working, you can go back to that and just look at it and think, why is that person not engaging? Let me just see if there's anything in there. So it's just useful to have that information in case you need it, and then to help you shape the session in a broad way that can impact others. It can also help you structure the session, because again, some of our sessions, they're group sessions, but some of our sessions with sense are short, 10 minutes of with individuals, so it's a group that watches, they enjoy watching what's happening and listening to music, but then we work one-to-one in a more intense way with individuals within their capacity, and that can work really well because they have very specific needs.
You touched a little bit about the space that you work in a couple of times. What top tips can you pass on to our coaches and instructors about how you plan your sessions and your activities, specifically related to environment or equipment? Are there any ways you set up the environment to make sure that it's engaging?
Sometimes people don't like physical touch, so having some type of equipment or prop can help with interaction. When you think about equipment or items or props, things that are tactile, or that again might make a sound or have lighting of some sort can be a really positive sort of stimulant to engage people. So again, thinking about what are the sort of props that you can use in the room. And I would also say, as part of that preparation, is just, I always try to have a sort of plan A, B, C, D, E, just a sense of, if this doesn't work, then what? What are the different options in terms of adapting? Because especially again with complex needs, no two sessions are the same. One day someone will be really happy and they'll come in and they'll want to take part. Another day they just might not be having a good day and will prefer to sit. So just thinking about, okay, how can I still include someone based on what might happen and what might change?
How do you adapt your delivery to ensure that people can work towards the outcomes that they want to achieve?
Yeah, that's really important, because I think you can have a lot of fun once you know what the goals are. So for example, if people are taking part in something for fun and for social reasons, we can introduce things like an end of program, or a sort of quarterly or whatever opportunity to perform and to showcase something they're doing to friends and family, and or create social events, like whether it's a tea dance or sort of a party in inverted commas, but something that's much more sort of founded in something social and more of a social activity. If it's about leadership or independence, then we can introduce things like encouraging people to lead bits of the session, or to show, to come up. It can be something simple like come up with a move, just show us a particular move. And that can be something from, some choreography that someone's created, or with people with complex needs, it might just be a simple arm gesture, or, something, a small turn in their wheelchair, for example, but just getting people to take some form of leadership. If it's about communication and connecting with people, then getting people to work together, some more group work and more interactions between participants, or between participants and staff, for example. If it's about fitness and mental and physical health, then it's thinking about the content in terms of, whether that's something that might encourage people to sort of stand up and sit down in terms of mobility, or to reach for things if it's about flexibility, thinking about the structure of a session. So again, if it's about managing anxiety, making sure that you ease into a session, but also that you have, sort of a calming, sort of relaxing end to the session where people just sort of get to center themselves, and you can support them to do that. So understanding why people are participating is really, really important, because it completely influences how you then structure and focus a session.
Right, some really good ideas there, and I think that the coaches and instructors listening will hopefully kind of take that away in terms of the planning kind of being completely altered depending on what the goals are of the people that are taking part, and that's really important. So yeah, some really good ideas in there. It's really important, obviously, to reflect and evaluate to understand if activities are going well, if people are getting the outcomes that they want to achieve from them, if they're engaging in a way which is kind of meaningful and appropriate for them. How do you evaluate and reflect on sessions in order to learn and plan for the next one?
Yeah, that's really important. And so both myself and especially with my team, after the teachers run a session, we always have a readout. So it's just it can be something quite short, just a sort of voice note to me or something where they're just reflecting on what worked, what didn't work. And then that might be followed up with a conversation. And I think there's a couple of things. One, in terms of reflecting. So, sort of reflective practice is really important. So that's individuals, myself, reflecting on how the session went and, understanding, okay, what worked, what didn't work, what can I do differently in future? Getting feedback in the session. So getting feedback from the participants. And again, that doesn't necessarily have to be verbal feedback, just getting a sense of, what was their response? How did they interact with me? Getting a sense of feedback from families or carers, support staff that were there to understand, is this meeting your expectations? Are the things we could be doing differently? And having conversations with peers, because, sometimes if things aren't working or someone's had challenging behavior that's been difficult, to manage, teachers and I will have a conversation and just to say, okay, what could we do differently? Is there something that the staff need to do or carers need to do? Is it about, and just reflect on how you can improve, what you're doing. And also for some of our sessions that are, longer term, where we have regular people every single week, we just we sort of have a monitoring form where each week, if there's something in particular that stands out, so it isn't on every person every week, but if someone particularly did something well or not well, we just note it so that we can track. And that's been really helpful, even also just to be able to advise or give feedback to parents. So, we have someone with high needs that's been attending a session and her, her mother has come back sort of saying, I think she had, when you sort of hear dance, maybe she was expecting something very specific. And I was able to go through, all the small wins because that person was very shy, very introverted, very nervous. And, she started sort of contributing moves and focusing and making friends. And, the fact that we've sort of recorded those observations over the last 10 weeks meant I could go back and say, well, here's where she started and this is what we've seen. And, these are all really important sort of goals. She's come into a space that she doesn't know anyone and et cetera, et cetera. So that's another reason just to help you. I think especially with people with complex needs, I find because I have come sort of from that environment, I think I can appreciate small wins. But I think for some of our teachers and some of the people that, that will be benefiting from the training that you're offering, those sorts of small wins can be underestimated. And, we have sessions where someone might not have participated and this time they've come in the room and watched what's happening. And, those are really positive, advances and where, they've actually connected with a teacher or held their hand and never have before. And just, constantly appreciating and celebrating those small steps are really important when it comes to people that have bigger challenges.
Great tips there, Rashmi, and thank you for joining us. I'm sure everyone's found that really useful. So thanks for your time.
Thank you. You're welcome.